Meeting is called to order.
Roll call for the City Council meeting of Wednesday, December 6, 2017 at 9 a.m. Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Jones, Mr. Mirsky, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon. Please rise for a moment, silent meditation and pledge of allegiance.
Mr. President, as always, I'd ask that we remember those in our community that are less fortunate than we are, both locally, globally. Also remember those who have lost loved ones since the last time we were in these chambers. Remember them in our thoughts and prayers. And finally, we ask that our God and Creator gives us the wisdom and the proper information to make the best decisions for the citizens of the city of Erie.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of minutes from the City Council meeting of November 15th, 2017, and bills for payment on December 1st and 8th, 2017. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Jones, Mr. Mirsky, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Kwiatkowski.
Are there any citizens here for repository sales? Are there any citizens here for repository sales? One last time. Are there any citizens here for repository sales? Hearing none. At this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Councilman Witherspoon, who has a couple commendations.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to ask Bill Jaron and Mary Beth to come forward, please. They represent Penn-Lake. Are they here? They aren't here. Well, this is going to be a quick one. Well, I had a presentation for them. Penn-Lake, along with the city and other businesses in the city of Erie, supported the Summer Basketball League. Penn-Lake has been with us for 27 years, as well as the city and many other businesses. And we just wanted to show our appreciation because their support saved lives of our young people. We have them 5 days a week, 7 hours sometimes, but definitely 5 hours a day. And coaches coach on the weekend, etc. And we wanted to show our appreciation for that. So I will make sure Bill and Mary Beth receive their awards and their thank you, and of course I will be calling them for support for 2018. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Witherspoon. At this time, we'll have citizens be heard. Rose, did anybody call in?
No.
We're going to open it up to citizens be heard. Please give your name, address, and keep your comments to 5 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Happy holiday. Art Leopold, 5341 Apple Grove Lane, Erie, PA. My first item today is in support of a pause, a relook at the action on the McBride Viaduct Bridge. I was at a meeting in a march there this past weekend, and I said to my fellow supporter, where are the people out here that are marching to tear this thing down? Where is the public cry to tear this down? You know what? There isn't any. You can't find a citizen that I know of that says we need to tear that thing down. There is a safety issue here, gentlemen. I'm a member of Erie County United. There are 20-plus organizations that belong to Erie County United, which is in support of this effort to at least pause and to take another look. That's all. There are conflicting facts. It's time to know what the facts are. Also, there's a police review panel that has been brought up in discussion. Long before the meeting at Pfeiffer Burley, we met with the police and the public and we had discussion. I have been for a police review panel. It fosters a better relationship between the public and the police and more, and I stand wholeheartedly in support of that effort. And I thank the Councilwoman for bringing that forward. There is a Senate bill in front of the PA State Legislature right now, Bill 501, to keep guns out of the hands of domestic abusers. Sounds like good logic. And whatever council can do to support that, to actually prohibit abusers from possessing guns, makes good sense. And I think that should be considered. I want to thank council for listening to the experts on community benefit agreements. I'm a long proponent of that. I've talked before recently the County Financing Authority when they were considering financing for the proposed new owner of Family First. I informed them about community benefit agreements. The proposed new owner is on board for the discussion, and I want to thank council for listening. And now, let's take some action. Let's do something in support of community benefit agreements. And lastly, I want to thank council for your support of the decriminalization of marijuana. Very important issue, as you know. I'd like to see an ordinance up for vote. And I was in the mayor's office this morning trying to get an appointment to talk with him. I do thank you for your efforts. Happy holiday to you.
Good morning. My name is Melinda Meyer, and the address, you need an address, right? 114 Carver Avenue, Erie, 16511. I want to thank you for the opportunity to come before you and talk a little bit about or speak on behalf of the demolition delay ordinance. I'm here on behalf of Preservation Erie. Preservation Erie is an advocacy organization, and we support educating the community about the importance and significance of historic preservation. I wrote my notes down in an effort to keep it under 5 minutes. I've been told I'm long-winded. So in the past year or so, the wrecking ball has fell twice in downtown Erie. Almost. 2 historic buildings, the Williams Brooks House, which is a home located on or within the West 6th Street Historic District, and the old Swedish Baptist Church located on Holland Street, which was built in 1906 by a blossoming congregation of Swedish immigrants. These 2 properties, these 2 buildings were spared only after additional consideration was made to finding alternatives to demolition. It's time for Erie to join other communities like Allentown, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and take steps to protect our unprotected resources. Through the adoption of a demolition review ordinance, older buildings, specifically those 75 years and older, as stated in the proposed ordinance, cannot be demolished without review by a preservation commission or special committee to determine whether a building is historically significant. If the building qualifies as significant, then a commission may delay the issuance of a demolition permit to explore preservation alternatives, such as designating the building as a historically significant landmark or finding a purchaser who may be interested in rehabilitating the building. As was the case in the first 2 examples, alternatives to demolition were found for both the West 6th Street property and the Swedish Baptist Church. Demolition review procedures help to determine the demolition of historically significant buildings. Given the vast number of older buildings in Erie, it is virtually impossible for us to identify all buildings that should be protected under a historic preservation ordinance in advance. By establishing a referral mechanism, we can be assured that buildings meriting preservation will not fall through the cracks. The delay period actually would provide an opportunity for the Commission or other interested parties to negotiate a preservation solution with the property owner or to find persons who might be willing to purchase, preserve, rehabilitate, or restore such buildings rather than demolish them. I won't go into why historic buildings are important because my assumption is, as city council members, you love this city. And so through your love of the city, or with your love of the city, you have a love of its people and its places. And of course, our historic buildings, our built landscape is part of what makes Erie special and part of what makes us love it. What's going to be important with establishing an effective demolition review ordinance is going to be making sure that the process is effective and efficient, making sure that both the committee or commission has the resources it needs to make good decisions, making sure city staff has the resources they need to make good decisions. And I think all of that can be done. So we support the resolution this morning calling for the solicitor to review a proposed ordinance and make recommendations, and for the Planning Commission to also take the time to review the proposed ordinance for, hopefully, future passage. So we support Councilman Brennan's resolution this morning on the proposed historic or the delayed demolition delay ordinance. Thank you this morning for your time.
Good morning and happy holidays. Adam Trott, 531 West 6th Street, second floor. I have a couple of things I just wanted to touch base on with the council this morning. One is to also support the demolition delay ordinance. Erie CPR supports it. Civitas supports it. Discussions I have had with various members of the American Institute of Architects are always supporting those kinds of initiatives. So there is a lot of support for this demolition delay ordinance. Thank you for crafting it and moving it into the public discussion. The next thing I want to touch base on is that we've been told by PennDOT regarding the McBride Viaduct that the bids are due December 21st. That's the day after the last city council meeting of the year. We have heard speculation that there's concern that the administration may try to do an end around city council and not get your endorsement of the contract so that the current mayor can sign it before he loses authority to sign it. And we would ask that city council would want to be in on that loop and not be circumvented in approving any contract to demolish the McBride Viaduct. The work on the injunction continues. I was thinking we were going to file it this week. I haven't heard from the attorney that we're not, so I'm hopeful that we do get that filed. Again, we're pushing for the public hearing. I have one thing I wanted to share with City Council, an example of what we're dealing with in our advocacy. These are PennDOT tip reports. And these reports are official publications regarding the status of a project. And I have 3 of them. One is September 13th, and in that report, it stipulates in the year 2017, they're only going to spend $100,000 on this project. On September 14th, a colleague of mine at Erie CPR, Freda Tepfer, and I spoke before the State Transportation Commission down in Cranberry Township and advised them of issues and concerns we have with this proposed demolition. And part of our argument was that we have time to have a public hearing because, according to PennDOT, they're only spending at most $100,000 on this project fiscal year 2017. Well, when we met with Laughlin and PennDOT officials at the McBride Viaduct, the PennDOT officials told me they had heard that we talked to the STC and it got back to them. And they didn't go into details, but they said it in a way that it was not comfortable for them. So the very next tip report on October 5th suddenly out of the blue says that they're going to spend $778,800 on the McBride Viaduct project, with no explanation on why all of a sudden the costs in 2017 are going to soar through the roof. We just got the latest tip report yesterday, dated December 5th, that says the exact same thing. There's been no explanation that we have had about why there was a sudden explosion of cost other than the circumstantial evidence that I've just given you. So I'm willing to share these with you. But that's one of a long list of things we have been dealing with regarding facts on this project, which is why we need that public hearing. And finally, I just want to make an analogy that if you're sitting in your home and your home needs some maintenance, and someone comes along and knocks on your door and says, hey, you know, you have 3 windows that are paint's chipping and they leak air. I can, for $200, I can rip those windows out and put Visqueen in their place. And I'll tell you what, you only have to give me $10 of that $200 to do it. What a deal, right? But then the neighbors of the resident say, well, if they rip out those windows and they put up Visqueen, you won't be able to look out of them like you used to. Your heating bills are going to go through the roof. And they're ugly. Visqueen is ugly. It makes your house look terrible. I don't think you should do it. And tell you what, we'll even give you $100 towards painting and resealing them, which to paint and reseal them would be about $200. Well, that's what I feel like we're doing with the viaduct. So thank you for your time. And again, happy holidays and thank you for your service.
My name is Freda Tepfer. I live at 1738 West 23rd Street in Erie. I have a master's in adult education, and I'm a certified orientation and mobility specialist. I want to speak largely about pedestrian issues in the city, and on this agenda you have number 6 is to ensure that there be a sidewalk built at Green Garden and West 12th. I want to commend John Tushak for acknowledging an oversight made by the Public Works Department that there should have been a sidewalk called for when that redevelopment project was approved. And the reason you're seeing it on the agenda again is because there was a mistake in which landowner was cited. But I'm very happy to see that. I met with the Mayor's Roundtable on Disabilities, and I've met repeatedly with Leanne Palmer, the traffic engineer, and I've talked repeatedly with Mas Sala, and I commend them for their forward thinking and their work. And I want to say that Erie Insurance has put up some very attractive sidewalk closure signs. They're really pretty signs, but if you're blind, you have no idea they're there. They're not placed in a manner that somebody can divine without sight what's going on. The city said that they're going to follow the PennDOT bulletin on dealing with construction sites. Signage has to be detectable. And if there is an alternative pathway for sighted people, it has to be provided as well for people who are visually impaired, and they have to know how to find it. So once again, Erie Insurance and Gannon are some of the worst offenders in poor consideration of our visually impaired residents in their construction activities. I was one of the Erie CPR members who was present Monday morning demonstrating by walking. We circumambulated the crossing at the Bayfront Connector and East 12th Street to demonstrate what it's like when you try to cross under those busy traffic conditions. Interestingly, one of the vehicles that display the typical right-turning vehicle behavior that is being oblivious to the cars that are crossing legally in front of you was a public works truck. I put my hand out, stop, which anybody who was there with me can tell you that's what I did to any of the right turners to make sure that they did not turn while we had the right of way to walk, and they had a kind of a very perturbed look on their face. This is typical. Monitor yourself when you're turning right. Which way are you looking? You're not looking to see if people are crossing straight ahead of you. If you're turning left, you're not looking for pedestrians. But we want to put our kids there. One of the members of our group had headaches and nausea as a result of walking in an area where there was that much traffic. This is what we're saying, that never was there any public scrutiny of the decision to move the crossing to 12th and the Bayfront Connector rather than the sidewalk which was promised on the south side of the street. Never was there any serious consideration of the impacts on health to walking alongside heavy traffic, or the noise, or the psychological impacts imposed by that. We are saying that the city has an opportunity to behave appropriately and to consider those who depend on that pedestrian route. The PennDOT official who said to me, I see two structures, there's no difference, yet he has never walked it. There's a big difference. There's a big difference in the experience. Lastly, I would like to urge departing council members and those who are remaining on the council to take up an opportunity to open the process of making appointments to boards, commissions, and authorities. We keep appointing the same people over and over again. There should be a process for people to know about and apply for vacancies. Thank you again.
How you doing? My name is Kedar Muhammad, 1920 Woodlawn Avenue, 16510. Recently, I've been coming to city council meetings discussing economic development within the city. And I spoke to, one of the first time I came here, I spoke to a representative from Young Erie Professionals, or YEP. I've been in contact with him the past couple of days, and I've told him some areas that I feel like we need to work on. I feel as far as like in the city, as far as like redevelopment, and as far as an economical standpoint. Three main districts I want to say is the East Bayfront, the Pulaski Lighthouse District, and the Fairmont McClellan District. Those three main districts I feel like are some areas that probably has a little bit more blight that hasn't been worked on as opposed to on the other side of town. And also it's a lot of opportunities there, I feel like, in development. And it's being used in different ways as opposed to where it could be used for. And he liked the idea, and we're going to get together and we're going to start discussing a couple ideas and things like that we can do to help redevelop and bring those areas specifically more back up. So I would like to, have Representative Jones and Mr. Murski involvement on that type of development as far as in those areas. And then also the last time I was here, that was the main part. And another thing I noticed, noticed a lot of talk about the viaduct and the bridge, which is also in that area. I went to it was a young lady here who was from an organization that was trying to do something with the viaduct. So I tried to go back and see if I could watch the video, but the video wasn't up. All of the other videos from that city council meeting before that was up, except for that one. So I just had a question as far as like why that one was not put up. That happened to be the same day that the incident with the protest outside the city courthouse. He actually came in that day. He was arrested the next day after he came in from city council. So, and then the video wasn't put up of him when he came in with his problems and his issues. So I just thought that was funny as well. So I just wanted to come in and also ask about that, and also let you know about some of the development in those areas. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
My name's Sister Michelle Schreck. My address is 2005 Woodlawn Avenue. I'm from the House of Mercy, It's Erie, PA 16510. I'm not used to doing this. I've never done this before, but I feel pretty strongly that there's a lot of political stuff going on with this viaduct issue, and I really encourage you to stand up. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me as just a normal, informed citizen who reads the paper and listens to the news, why we can't have a hearing on it, why we're trying to get this done by December. Is the money going to all run out? Is that what it's about? It seems political. I've walked on the pathway with kids before. I serve at the House of Mercy, and I'm part of the East Side Grassroots Coalition. The youth and families on our side of town would have to go a longer walking distance to go on the Bayfront connector. And there are many portions of the Bayfront connector that don't have sidewalk or that are unsafe. So I would just encourage you, it doesn't make any sense to me why we can't have a public hearing on this. So that's all I want to say. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Barry Clark. I live at 2035 East 19th Street. And I, too, am speaking on behalf of the concerns for the McDowell Viaduct. I live in that area. I see kids walking that area going back and forth to school. And I'm going to just make it short and sweet. That viaduct is needed. I walked that viaduct many times, and I see kids that go back and forth to school. The Division Street viaduct was closed up. Kids that live in that area now have to go all the way to French Street or Parade Street just to go to Piper Burley. These are little kids. They're a little bit older going to East Middle School now, but we've been blessed to have nice weather. But once the weather changes, it's going to be a hardship to those kids that are walking back and forth going to school. I read in the paper the other day where Mr. Brenneman is trying to save some of the historical buildings. Remember why that bridge was built in the first place. It's for the safety of our kids. My thing is, I hope that when you guys get old, people just don't get away with you. Thank you.
Good morning, members of council. I'm George Deitch. I'm the executive director of the Erie County Historical Society, and I live at 3540 Sassafras. I'm very passionate about Erie's heritage. Obviously, my job makes that happen. But I'm also a homeowner in the city. When I returned to the city a year and a half ago, I bought a house 4 blocks from where I grew up, so I have long ties to the city. And I believe that the ordinance on the demolition delay ordinance strikes a balance between the property owner's rights. It does not take away their ability to remove a building, but it gives a delay. It gives an opportunity for some additional consideration. And I think it strikes that important balance between our heritage and the property owner's rights. There have been multiple examples of where houses have been saved and buildings have been lost in the city over the years. The Bar Association with the West 6th Street property took the time and found an alternative other than to take down that historic house in the 500 block. But other places like the Cunningham House, the oldest home in Erie, which was destroyed overnight a number of years ago, the Reed Mansion, if you go to Peek and Peak, you can see parts of it, but it no longer exists on West 6th Street. So we need to have some consideration before buildings of historic character are demolished. And I'm not one for just blind preservation. As a matter of fact, I supported the city this year in writing a letter to the state when the city wanted to take down 2 older, probably each 100 years old, blighted properties over on the east side. The city came to me and we investigated and decided that there was no intrinsic historic value in these buildings. So I believe that this commission will be in a position to strike that balance. So I would speak for that ordinance. I think it's important to maintain Erie's our community heritage. Once a building of historic value is destroyed, the neighborhood is never quite the same. So I'd like to ask that you consider Councilman Brennan's proposal here as motion for this ordinance and strike that balance between our heritage and the property owner's rights, giving that period of delay. One final thing, you also have a resolution sponsored by Councilman Brennan for the Federal Historic Tax Credit. This is an important tool. Unfortunately, we don't use that enough here in Erie. I've lived in other communities that use that quite a bit more, but it has been used. There's been a number of buildings that have been saved and rehabilitated in Erie with use of those tax credits. Right now, the Senate version of the new tax bill is preserving it. The House is not. They have to go to conference. And I believe any support from the city of Erie for this historic tax credit would be important as the congressmen and senators decide whether or not to keep that important preservation tool in the tax code. So thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you.
Good morning. Morning. Kevin Pastevka, 722 East Grandview. I'm going to be brief this morning. I'm going to speak in the regards the issue of transparency, a hot topic word that was thrown around the last meeting. And I've been to the viaduct. I've walked on the viaduct. I grew up on the east side. I drove over it a million times. I see a lot of people advocating for preserving the viaduct, and with a lot of good reasons. I don't know who's opposing it, and that's what I guess I'm real curious about. In the sake of transparency, there's a lot of let's save the viaduct, let's preserve the viaduct. I've yet to hear anyone come up here to the mic and say let's tear down the viaduct. So I'm just very curious, who is pushing to tear it down? Where's that coming from? So that's my concern. Thanks.
Sister Cynthia Muhammad, 2213 Parade Street, Erie. I also am a member of the committee to not demolish the bridge. We were there all the time trying to make sure that it stays where it is. I am a former I'm early childhood major from Villa College. Always work with children, and the safety of children is paramount. It's very important. The gentleman just asked who's opposing it, and I'm going to ask why. Why would you oppose a place that can be made beautiful, made jobs, and keep our children safe? I understand they want to put a bridge there, a fence around the place where the children were killed when Father McBride went to bat to keep the bridge, to get it real. Children are children. That fence is not going to stop them. So I ask you all to consider, don't demolish the bridge. We need that bridge. Also, I'm the publisher of the Erie Metropolitan Black Page Business Directing Resource Guide. I brought a copy for each of you. I did ask the new mayor, what the city was going to do in terms of working with the entrepreneurs. Last time that occurred, it was Joyce Savacchio that worked with Gary Horton was her assistant. And we got some good things out of that, and we'd like you to help us. The mayor told me about Civitas, about Erie Collaborative and some other places, some private industries that are working to work with the entrepreneurs. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about what the city is going to do. And I do also have a copy for your new members here. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Nice to see you all again, City Council. I, too, am a big fan of the book that you have in your hand. It's a key guide to the economic development potential of the city if we can invest more in some of those businesses. So I encourage you to try to shop from that book. I have 3 points I'd like to bring up to you today. First of all, I want to commend you, Councilman Brennan, for this long ordeal of finally bringing both the tax credit and the demolition delay to a vote. I know that there's been hours and hours of work on this. This has actually been a vision since 2005. The group of us that have come together to form both Civitas and Preservation Erie have been seeing the potential and the need for something to fill the gap here. We don't have anything that's protecting our historic properties. And just a moment ago, the head of the Erie County Historical Society spoke to you specifically about the heritage point of view. I'd like to shift it for a moment and to frame it in terms of economic development. Cities that embrace their historic properties actually see land values rise. They actually will be providing more jobs to local constituents who can actually fix these buildings. And the other thing I want to point out is that I'm not against demolition per se, but one of the things that we see here in Erie is that whenever something is demolished, we don't replace it with anything nearly as nice, nearly as well built, nearly as related to the physical environment. So, in other words, we're hurting our potential economic development by tearing these things down. So your resolution is really, really important, and I hope that your colleagues will support you today. The second point I would like to just make is that there's been so much conversation about the McBride Viaduct, but I want to repeat this little story. If you go to buy a car, you sign a contract, and when you come back, they have tripled the price and removed one of the wheels, one of the tires, you would have a problem with that. And so what I'm asking you to do is to recognize that what was presented in 2013 by the L.R. Kimball firm about what was going to happen has had a similar change. There have been significant price increases and abandonment of the safety solutions. In other words, they said they were going to put a sidewalk on the south side of East 12th. It's not going to happen. So again, little kids are going to be dodging cars, trucks, and tractor trailers to get to school. What kind of city are we? So we need to have a hearing. I am not asking you to commit to saving this bridge. There's a lot of complicated factors involved in something like that. But for the sake of transparency, and this city is owed a public hearing on the record with PennDOT, with the city, with CPR, with Adam Trott, with Freda Tepfer. The people that have been studying this issue need to be able to share it. And you can vet, and the community can vet the issues that we've been raising. Okay, so I want to also say that I think that the role of City Council in this particular issue is crucial. We don't just have in this city a mayor sitting there like a king and an emperor who can do anything he wants, although that does seem to be the impression. You are here as a balance to vet his judgment or her judgment, and you are able to overrule his or her decisions. And what I'm asking you is to point out that this mayor, I know he's got plenty to be praised for, but he has got plenty to be criticized for. And I'm criticizing him because he has refused to meet with us. He's refused to engage and have a conversation or allow his staff to have a conversation with anybody with a city planning background over this issue. You've got to recognize that the viaduct demolition was engineered by engineers. We had not a single city planner involved in the conversation. Again, the same example I gave before. You have a brain tumor, you don't go to a dermatologist. You find somebody who understands the brain. The city has not brought in the necessary expertise to examine this, but we have. We've brought in 4 experts, and they're unanimous. They all say, save the bridge. John Norquist wrote about it in the Erie Times News in 2015. Why is this information not being considered? I want to point out again, Charles Buki, it's probably already been stated today, who was paid to study the city and come up with a plan, said that transparency is crucial, and he wrote it in the Erie Times, or it was reported that he has asked for a public hearing. He has not asked to definitely save the bridge, but he's asked for transparency. I'm going to follow up and conclude with just handing you this letter, asking you that in order to ensure the public's trust in our government, you need to help bring a public hearing with the city and with PennDOT.
Please wrap it up.
Right away. Here's the paper. Thank you. Remember, you're not a rubber stamp for the mayor.
Are there any other citizens to be heard? Are there any other citizens to be heard? One last time. Are there any other citizens to be heard? At this time, Mel, do you want to? Okay, we're going to try to give the award out again, as our guests are now here. So, Mr. Witherspoon, you have the floor.
Once again, I'd like to ask Mary Beth and Bill Jern to come forth. Good to see you.
Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you. Dr. Beck. What's up? Good to see you. Once again, on behalf of the Spoon Summer League, and what I didn't say, we need to realize that the Spoon Summer League is a city rec program. And we go out and we ask foundations and we ask business and industry to support what we're doing. Penelec has been the number one supporter. Prior to the 27 years, they were involved 5 years prior to that. And now Mary Beth, who is the, Director of External Affairs, and Bill is the manager for External Affairs. I have two presentations. The first one I'll give to Mary Beth is for First Energy Foundation, who supports our organization. We'd like to give that to you. And to Bill, I'd like to present to you, on behalf of Penelec, both organizations support what we do for our kids. We had 316 kids this past season, and they sponsor, encourage, and support what we do. We save lives, and that's what they're about in the community. They're very active in so many other things in our community. And I want to thank you very, very much. Would you like to say something, please?
Sure. Thanks, Spoon. Guys, I have a long history with Spoon, being I grew up with him almost in a way at Penelec. But, the foundation and Penelec are very happy to support the different programs within the community because it is important to us. We want a vibrant community, and our children are very important to us. So, Spoon, congratulations on so many years of I don't even know how many years you've been doing it. A lot, right? Yeah. A lot. But congratulations on this, and let's have many more.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Go ahead. Okay. Thank you very much. Would you shake hands with that?
Thank you, Mr. Witherspoon. Thank you, sir. Rose?
Ordinances for final passage. Council File 15609, official ordinance number 32/2017, an ordinance appropriated the sum of $15,300 from unappropriated and anticipated revenue and providing for the expenditure thereof. Contribution of $15,000 is from the Star Athletic Club and $300 from the Slovak National Club. Sponsored by Mr. Witherspoon, seconded by Mr. Winowski, that Council File Bill number 15609, and now known as Official File Ordinance 32/2017, be finally passed by the City Council. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Jones, Mr. Mursky, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Kwiatkowski. City Council passed Official File Ordinance number 32/2017 finally by yeas 7, nays 0.
Thank you, Rob.
That'll take us to new business.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Jones.
I would like to move the balance of the agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Are there any separations?
Yes. Yes, Mr. President. 2 and 3.
Pardon?
Number 2 and 3 in new business.
Okay. 2 and 3 under new business.
Number 1.
Number 1. under new business?
Yes.
Okay, any other separations? Are there
All right.
any other separations? Okay, Rose?
Moving the balance of the agenda, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Jones, Mr. Mursky, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Kwiatkowski. By Mr. Brennan and seconded by Mr. Winarski, resolved by the Council of the City of Erie that R. Jason Wazork of 945 West 9th Street, Erie, is reappointed to the Blight Property Review Committee. Mr. Wazork's new term will expire December 31st, 2019. Comment?
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr.
I just have a couple questions for the maker. We did get an email from the Redevelopment Authority saying that a lot of people on that Blighted Property Review Committee weren't showing up. I just wanted to make sure that Mr. Wazork was one of the people that's showing up regularly. We don't want to appoint somebody who isn't coming.
Mr. Brennan?
Yeah, I did have a conversation with Mr. Wazork. I think there was one meeting, or there's a couple key meetings that he couldn't go to one of them, but I did inform that we'd want to make sure that you're at all these meetings, so I stressed the importance of the meetings, and he was at a lot of meetings that were canceled, so I think it was just kind of some bad timing, but definitely it's very important to show up to these meetings.
I know we had two medical problems on that board. My appointment was one of them.
Yeah. I just want to make sure, that when we don't have a quorum, the blight is a big issue in this city, and that committee does do good work, and we want to honor the people that are making that commitment by making sure there's a quorum that they can actually do
It was a weird set of circumstances. Like we had my appointment went into he had medical problems. Another member, he had medical problems. He wasn't an appointee though. And David, I hope you'll make it clear to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then just one more question. It's my understanding that Mr. Wazork works with you, Mr. Brennan. So is there any ethics violations or issues, I should say? I just want to make sure that we have that cleared up so that we don't have any problems with that. I know you're leaving council, so that might not be an issue.
Mr. Slisser, should we turn it over to him?
I don't know. I mean, it's just I just want to make sure that we're, doing things by the book.
I don't think that there's any problem with that.
Okay.
All right, then roll call. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Jones, Mr. Mursky, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Kwiatkowski. This resolution will pass by yea 7, nay 0. By Mr. Brennan and seconded by Mr. Winarski, a resolution in support of preserving and enhancing the federal historic tax credit. Comment?
Mr. Brennan?
Yes, I want to thank the people who came in today to talk about this, that mentioned this in their speech today. But also wanted to say a few words. Similar to some of the other comments here, that I propose this resolution, the concern over the current tax reform that's the legislation that's currently being debated in U.S. Senate. The federal tax credit program was enhanced by Congress and Reagan administration in order to rehabilitate historic buildings, of which Erie has many. To help stimulate local economies by attracting capital investment. We've talked about many of the buildings that we do have. Erie has a great amount of buildings that we've had and buildings that we still have, and we want to help to leverage any private dollars as possible. And if we could, if this could help keep this in place and even enhance it, that's what I brought up for. Some City of Erie projects that have benefited in the past are the Lovell Place, Dixon Tavern, Erie Armory, and also the 502, 504 State, where Starbucks and Molly Brannigan's is located, and there's many other projects. So I put this on the agenda to support this effort, and hopefully we can keep this in place and help. It'll definitely help our city. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Mr. President.
Yes.
And some of this conversation we've had over the last probably longer than a year, just for the sake of clarity. So the process would be, is enacted, there would be a committee or a commission that would kind of review these questions, and what is the process in relation to that. Maybe for citizens to know a little more.
Are you talking about the historic tax credit?
I'm sorry. I combined them both in my head. I'll save that question for the demolition.
One helps the other, so it's definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Mirsky.
I want to thank Mr. Brennan for bringing this up, and I encourage everybody who was coming up and talking about the bridge from Civitas and Erie CPR to contact their congressmen and their state or their federal senators and let them know that that federal historic tax credit does benefit Erie, and it does align with everything that they're trying to do in preserving buildings and in order to preserve buildings, oftentimes, and especially to restore buildings to their former glory, it takes a lot of money. And, Joe Biden said, don't tell me what you value, show me where your budget is, and I'll tell you what you value. And so these historic tax credits are important. Please, this resolution will we will send a letter to our congressman and our senator, but I encourage this community to do the same because the more voices they hear, the better. Thank you, Mr. Brennan, for doing this.
Any other comments? I'd like to say that I read numerous newspapers over the last month since this has come down the pike, and it's all over the internet. Many communities, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Detroit, many cities out in the east of Pennsylvania, historically in the south, they're all bringing up the same issue, that this is a program that's beneficial to keeping old buildings and to repurposing them. As David pointed out, the most recent one, I think, David, is the Armory project. Here you're dealing with a building that is now on the tax rolls, eventually will be, if it's not already, and it could easily have been walled down, forgotten, turned into a warehouse or something, and now you look at it and it's an asset down on Parade Street. So I think this is a program we have to support. It's one of those, as they say, those no-brainers that will preserve old buildings and would serve the public a general good. So I'm glad to support this. Rose, call for the question.
Roll call. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Jones, Mr. Mirsky, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Ms. Kwiatkowski. This resolution will adopt by yeas 7, nays 0. By Mr. Brennan, seconded by Mr. Winarski, resolved by the Council of the City of Erie that the city solicitor is respectfully requested to review and finalize the draft of the proposed demolition delay ordinance, and after preparation of said ordinance, forward to the City Planning Commission for recommendation and report thereon to Erie City Council. The goal of the proposed ordinance is to preserve and protect significant buildings and structures within the city which constitute or reflect distinctive features of the architectural, cultural, economic, political, and social history of the city, and to limit the detrimental effect on community character and heritage that would result from the demolition of such buildings and structures. The ordinance would provide a process to impose a waiting of not more than 90 days before granting a permit for demolition of any building or structure that is designed to be significant. Comment?
Mr. President?
Yes.
I will re-ask my question.
Okay.
On the agenda item that it makes sense to ask it directly. So can you just, Mr. Brennan, would you just kind of speak to the process of what this is going to look like? Gentleman, I apologize, I didn't write down his name, who's the head of the Historic Society that spoke a few moments ago, mentioned that there were other areas and other older buildings that didn't rise to the historic relevance from his opinion and whoever else's opinion was involved in that, and they were demolished without kind of more research and opportunities to rehab them or do something different. So can you just kind of speak to the process of how that would work and what that would look like for citizens?
Yeah. I put together the Q&A. I don't know if you get a chance to take a look at it. I try to answer some of those questions because there's a lot of questions around it, and trying to make it as simple as possible and try to go through the timeline. But essentially, any building over 75 years or older, when a person applies to tear down the building, they would fill an application, and the zoning official would forward that application to the Design Review Commission if it's over 75 years. And the commission would review it and make a written determination to the zoning official. And then the zoning, and there's a certain timeline for when this stuff would occur because we want to move along quickly. And then the zoning official would make the determination of whether it gets held back for 90 days. So you have the building commission who would review it, make a written determination, then the zoning administrator would be the final determinant of whether it gets held back 90 days or not. And really the 90 days is really to provide a window of opportunity for possible preservation, reuse. A lot of times these things happen overnight. You know, we hear about something, well, what happened to that building, and it just happens. So really, it's just a process that to try to promote our historic buildings, to try to promote saving our heritage. And I think what's most important is what a couple people had brought up is the economic benefits. But I guess back to the process is. And there's also an appeals process. If someone does not think their building has any significance and they determine that it's 90 days, they would be able to appeal up that process.
Is there a in-kind opportunity for a group that or an owner that has a building or a property that feels it does have some historic relevance to go back to, and then someone says it doesn't? Is there that reverse opportunity for appeal in the process? Because I just think since we've talked, and I've read some of the emails and then some of the questions that community folks have had, so I just kind of wanted to have this in the public space.
Yeah, that'd be part of the appeals process that they can do that.
Okay. In the Design Review Commission, folks would be, they would have that historic property, historic relevance background. I mean, we would have a means of making sure the criteria for participation in that commission would be individuals with relevant history, relevant expertise, et cetera.
Yeah, currently we have a design review committee, and the idea is to try to not create a brand new committee because, of course, these days it's tough to get people with the background education and the people to work in the committees. So the idea is to take that in committee and enhance that committee to provide a person from Preservation Erie. There's already a person from Erie County Historical Society, a landscape architect, an architect on that board, and also a member of the Economic Development Office and also the zoning.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Mursky.
Just a couple questions. How was 75 years decided as the cutoff?
Well, I know that several other cities, a lot of cities have 50 years, and I know I've talked about 50 years earlier, and I think we decided at 75 because I think there was a lot of people that said, well, a lot of old buildings in the area are older than that anyway, so we looked at other examples of other cities, and 75 was used also, so it was kind of an arbitrary number, and that number, actually, it's not arbitrary. It's a number that's been used in the past of other ordinances.
Okay. Because the only reason I ask is because that puts us at, when next year, if this passes, 1943, which is basically almost 2/3 of the city is built before 1943. So then does all of those buildings come up for review then? Like, let's just say, okay, there's a blighted property that's abandoned. It's been abandoned for 15 years on 7th and Reed. Does it goes through this process then?
Well, I think it's up to the zoning administrator. So that's a person who's central to this whole thing. They would make the determination of whether it even goes to the committee. So some of the things, if there's a problem with the buildings falling down, the building's blighted, those type of designations, you wouldn't even go through this process. That'd be the zoning administrator.
Thank you. That was my question. How would it affect our efforts for blight removal? Does it slow down blight removal? Because if it does that, then it's probably counterproductive to what we're trying to do to improve the city.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, that was my question too, David, that, as long as it doesn't hamper blight removal, but protects the, more relevant pieces.
Correct.
Is there any more discussion?
One more question.
Yes, go ahead.
And I'm supportive. I'm just being inquisitive because things are coming to me in the moment. In particular, do we have and this is maybe my ignorance, and I apologize, I'm sure we probably do, a list of properties that right now are on like the historic relevance roster, right? We have that.
There's the federal register, we have a state register of historic places, but also Preservation Erie, along with several funders, we put together the Erie County Inventory of Historic Properties. And in a past email, I can send you the link again, but there's an email that gets you to that link. And there's a study of all Erie County properties. So you have several resources out there that you could easily focus in and to see if it does have significance. And if it doesn't, then that would be the question with the committee.
Okay, great. And those are building properties, like houses, buildings?
All buildings.
All buildings. So a bridge, for example, a viaduct wouldn't be on the list like that?
That's
not a trick question. That's a legit question.
Well, really, it's anything that's architecturally significant or significant to history. So it could be structures.
Okay. All right.
Are there any areas, David, right now?
I'm sorry?
Are there any areas designated?
We have we definitely have federal registered areas in the city. We have West 21st Street, we have the West 6th Street Millionaires Row, and of course we have a lot of also on the block on the where Sherlock's is in that area. That block is a historic district.
So that would be triggered automatically.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's individual buildings, of course, like the Customs House where the art museum is. There's certain buildings that are individually listed. Lovell Place is also listed on the federal register.
Yeah, I'd like to say that, I've been around for a while, and Mr. Jones always liked to joke with me, but I was around in the late 60s and 70s when they really did a number on this town. We were promised brand new buildings. We're going to look like a mini New York, and it never happened. We ended up with parking lots, empty buildings, and the list is terrifying. When I was on the school board, we were faced with two issues alone. That was what to do with the public library and what to do with the Curtsey Mansion. Both had bypassed their usefulness. The school district was no longer going to be in the library or the museum business. And what do you do with those two buildings? Today, luckily it's home to the Historical Society. The other one, the federal government took over, which I was a proud co-sponsor of that. And I think we look at it now and we say, look what happened. Beautiful building. We tied in the Isaac Baker building. We tied in the new courthouse with the old public library. The Warner Theater, if you look back, it was probably days from being walled down until the city and the state got together and put it under the Civic Center. And you look around town, the Shays Theater now gone. Would have been a great landmark. Columbia Theater gone. Numerous other buildings gone. And all with the hope that we were going to be the new city. Federal money was there. What we did wrong is we tore down those properties only to discover that we were heading into a war shortly. And when Vietnam happened, the money got diverted from social programs, as it many times does, and went into the war effort. So we were left with a lot of empty fields, no new buildings for years. And in some cases, we never did get them back. So, I'm saddened by the number of things we lost that will never come back. And some of us have been to Lancaster recently on city business, and we've seen what they did. You can see parts of it in Allentown. You can see parts of it in Reading and many of the communities out east, but not us. We were quick with the ball on taking downtown down. So I think this is a good thing. I think, when I have visitors come here, they're impressed with Millionaires Row. And those of us who have toured the Curtsey Mansion recently, after they took the museum out of there and actually opened it up architecturally, and you can see what it looked like, I think it's great. And I think, David, it's a long time coming. I know you've been under a lot of pressure not to do this, but I think, it's something I want to do before my time is done, that I can say that not too many more buildings are going down in my time.
One final comment.
Go ahead, David.
Another benefit to this is if implemented, the City of Erie is eligible for the Certified Local Government Program, That's a National Park Service program, and the program provides funding incentives for enhanced technical assistance and training. So if this occurs, we're able to provide training in other programming type of funding for these type of things. So that's something that we definitely need to dive into.
Thank you, David. No other comments? Rhodes, call for the question.
Roll call. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Jones, Mr. Mursky, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Kwiatkowski. This resolution will adopt by yeas 7, nays 0. And that'll take us to committee reports, Mr. President.
Okay. Jim, we'll start with you.
Good morning, everyone. No committee reports this morning. Just want to make one comment that was on our final passage ordinance from the Star Athletic Club and the Slovak National Club. It's nice that a few local organizations and clubs which have a responsibility to give some of their small gaming money back to nonprofits where they see fit. It's nice that they think of the city of Erie once in a while. This money can go to whether it's some police equipment or some breathing apparatuses for the fire department, but little monies like this or monies like this does help with our budget. And I encourage more of our city clubs or organizations to remember us if they possibly could. It'd also be nice if ECRA, or Erie County Revenue Authority, would remember us too with some of that casino money. But I just want to make that note today. It's a time of giving, and I appreciate what these organizations are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winarski. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very quickly, some items. Obviously, we're still hearing a lot about the McBride Viaduct issue. I think there's a lot of conversation that still needs to happen. I'm not sure that there's necessarily been a rush. This has kind of been an issue for about the last 7 or 8 years, so it's kind of hard to call that a rush or hurry up and do. Respectfully, just because some of us are newer to the conversation doesn't mean the conversation just started. Now, but with that said, I would be, and this may be a request to Erie CPR, Civitas, whichever group or affiliation of the group that's wanting to preserve, could you give me, you have to give to everybody, but I'm asking for maybe the quick cheat sheet bullet points of like the 5 or 7, 8, 10, whatever things that are, in your opinion, significant change since what was originally offered, whether it be the sidewalk, whether it be price, whether it be whatever, from the original that we approved and have been kind of supporting. So if I could, I would love to get that this week if possible, and the ladies in the office have my email address, or you can stop and, after the meeting. So I have something tangible in my hand. Just a few of us have been talking about a couple of things. So again, I think that's still a legitimate conversation to have. Is there a, I think Mr. Brennan actually answered some of the questions that I had written down I wanted to address, so thank you for that. One question I did have, though, is there a part for the county to play in what we're doing in relation to the demolition? I know that there's the countywide directory and identified properties throughout the county, but is there another way that the county can participate in the historic preservation processes that we're doing in a tangible way? You don't have to answer that now.
Definitely. I know they've talked about it several times. They have a Erie County, I forgot the actual terminology, but it's an historic, it's part of their comp plan. Yep. They have a plan to, I'm not sure it's an actual plan, but, goals that they want to set for these type of things. So, one thing was the inventory, and there's other future steps, that they would like to take. So it's definitely being supported by them, and it's included in their comp plan. But it's not specific, do this and do this, but there's certain goals.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that. what was the other thing? Oh, I actually had an opportunity to, there was a group that came to Erie, that was brought to Erie, the Blue Zone Project, which is, well, I won't give the whole thing because I don't have all the clarity on it, but I did participate in their 2-day training and ideas and making our community a more healthy, walkable, accessible community. I see some citizens that are in the audience, and some of us as electeds had some involvement in that 2 days of training and conversation. I'll be participating tomorrow in a more deep drill down conversation with some of the leadership that's going to be in Erie and from Erie around how we can implement some of the vision and the program itself. One of the things that was a major concern is that this doesn't just become another thing that we have. We've got a bunch of things out there, but if we could synergize, which I think is the effort, like bringing all the different plans and groups and like-minded, vision-focused plans together to work in harmony as much as possible. I think if we could do that and continue to do that, and the Blue Zones Project is a tool that we can kind of implement or enmesh into this future planning and developing for our community, because a lot of what we've talked about with the comp plan, whether you call it Erie Focus, whatever you want to call it, the Buki plan, whatever, my biggest issue has always been the people component and not just the brick and mortar economic development component. And so this touches some of the people component in relation to, again, accessibility, walkability, bikeability, health overall, and in general. We got beautiful buildings where the people can't walk up the stairs and can't get around in those buildings. In communities, the people part, I think this could be a tool to help bring that to all of our comprehensive work and efforts that we're making. So, and again, I just want to commend Mr. Brennan for his diligence in his work and all the things that he's done in relation to this particular ordinance and getting it moving forward. And I guess the old term of stick-to-itiveness, I don't know if that's a real word or not, but it's definitely a spirit of the energy of what he's done. So thank you, Mr. President.
Mrs. Arrington.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I, too, would like to commend Mr. Brennan on his hard work. You're going out with a bang, you know. This is a hot topic, the viaduct, and one thing that I really want to do, and I think we should do it for our citizens, is have a public hearing, because there is still a lot of unanswered questions. It's a lot of he say, she say. When we get both parties in front of us, listening to the pros and cons, and then we can really make our decision on what we need to do. But we got to be able to hear both sides, and I think the public hearing is the way to go. So I support a public hearing. I hope some of my fellow councilmen will also support a public hearing so we can really hear what our citizens have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Mirsky.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few things to report as liaison to the Finance Department. We do have budget sessions after the meeting today, and we'll be going over the budget over the next few weeks, line by line and department by department. Before the meeting, we met with the Ray Massing from the Parking Authority and discussing some changes to the parking ordinance and allowing for upgrades to occur. This is something I've been passionate about and been working on for, like David with the stick-to-itiveness. For 2 years now, we've been pushing for this, and so it looks like we're finally breaking the logjam, and we're going to get some movement here pretty soon on that, and I'm excited about that. And just, you know, to address the viaduct, and I think there's a misconception that, well, one of the things that really frustrates me is when we're being called out as being for a lack of transparency, and everyone on this body has been transparent as to the best of our knowledge with everything that we know. If we know it, we let the community know, and I really think that's unfair to say that this city council has not been transparent, because that's patently false. The fact of the matter is, to Mr. Jones' point, this has been going on for 8 years. 8 years we've been talking about the viaduct. Many of my colleagues on here, we sat on the task force and we fought for the bridge and we worked hard to save the bridge. The recommendation of the state and federal government was to tear down the bridge. After community meetings, I was at the library for a community meeting, meetings at the JFK Center, meetings at East High. There were many, many meetings over these 8 years. Then we had another group, the Civitas, and they wanted to save the bridge as a pedestrian bridge. They went to the Metropolitan Planning Organization. The Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is all of Erie County, made recommendations to them to start a nonprofit and raise money. To the best of my knowledge, that hasn't happened. They wanted to run it like the High Line in New York City, where corporate donations and private donations, it was a true private-public partnership. That's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing, government should pay for the whole thing, and then we'll figure it out afterwards. Well, that's not how government works. And we don't figure things out afterwards, and we shouldn't, and that's not good government. And so the fact of the matter is we have been as transparent as we possibly know. Now, I'm not saying that PennDOT, we've had questions with PennDOT, and we've had serious conversations with them, and we've tried to get answers. But the fact of the matter is, anybody who's contacted me, and as to best of my knowledge, any of our council, rest of council, we've responded to every citizen who's had questions, and we address them. So to say that we're not transparent is it's an unfair, and it's an untrue statement. We're as transparent as to what we know. And the fact of the matter is, these conversations needed to happen 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when Father Jerry was involved. And we had all of this stuff that went on before. And now, we're in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes to go, and it's very frustrating because it doesn't honor the work that was done before, and it doesn't recognize that we fought this fight. And so I just wanted to let people know, anyone who's contacted me, I've always done my best to find an answer for them or to get back to them. You might not like the answer that I give you, but I always try to find an answer. We don't do this job because to put roadblocks up to community progress. We do this job because we care about the community. And, we might differ on what the outcome's going to be, but the fact of the matter is PennDOT made a decision, and that's where we are right now. So with that, Mr. President, I do just want to remind people that, like I said, the budget sessions are coming up, but with the holidays, please be careful with the driving. The weather's about to change from what we understand with the streets. Please drive carefully, and if you have any problems with your streets, my phone number. We'll give a call, and we'll take care of it with the streets department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murski. Mr. Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple things to pick up some of the things that Bob had said here about the parking authority. Like I said, we did meet with Ray Massing today and the solicitor to talk about the changes. So the ordinance changes will be coming up soon. We're going to review those a little bit further and see if there's any comments or possible tweaks to look at. And also technology upgrades. Looking at an app and credit card payments is something that we should have, we would like to have done already. But there's a lot of other things that we're looking to do to make the situation better, make it a better process. We might have a resolution at the next meeting. We're not sure, but we'll see how that goes. For the McBride Viaduct, as was mentioned earlier, I was just kind of reviewing all my notes for the past couple of weeks, and all the meetings that took place. We had 4 public meetings. Several of us were on the Citizens Advisory Committee. There was a lot of discussion, a lot of fighting, a lot of research, a lot of things done for this. And but saying that, I do see the value. Definitely see the value in public parks, amenities, and enhancing these physical connections between neighborhoods. But I guess with the study that was done, it was determined that these were the alternatives. Here's the pluses and minuses. Here's where they made a recommendation, and it was agreed to go with the recommendation. But saying that, I know there's several arguments about the facts, several arguments about the data that's out there. So I would be in agreement to have some type of meeting. I'm not sure if it's a public hearing or what format, but I would question in that format how much we really get done if we're just all just at the speaker trying to give our comments. I'd rather have a more focused discussion and try to address these things in what data is wrong and what data is not. But again, what like Mr. Jones had said, what are the new facts? What are the issues that have changed that would cause this meeting? So I would be in support of that meeting if it were to take place. Thank you.
Mr. Witherspoon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with Councilman Mirsky. We are transparent. We work our tails off. We go to a lot of meetings. We absorb a lot, and some things just go over head simply because you have a 3-hour meeting and you get tired. But we are transparent. We work very hard and diligently for the city. And sometimes individuals will come up to the mic and just chastise us. And we listen to you for 5 minutes. But I'll tell you about me. If you're saying something that's worth listening to, I absorb it. But all the hollering and accusing, they go in this ear and out that ear. So now you know. I hear you. If it's worth dealing with, we will deal with it. If it's within my bailiwick, I will deal with it, without a doubt. Regarding the viaduct, I agree with Mr. Mirsky on that, but I also agree with Councilwoman Arrington. There has been many, many meetings, community meetings. What will one more meeting do? We can fill this chamber, and everyone will have the opportunity to talk, to say whatever they have. What are you producing that has not been produced? What are you producing that's going to contradict what we have already? And we still have to make a decision. Where's the money coming from to maintain it? Yes, we are. If you know me, I'm concerned about children as well. Every one of us are. So if there's another meeting that takes place, fine. Based on my schedule, if I can be there, I'll be there. And I will listen. I don't know what will be presented that will change our minds. But if you want to meet just to meet, then that's unnecessary. But if you produce something that's positive, that's going to show me where the money's going to come from, to make, not only refurbish the bridge, but maintain the bridge. Are you looking for traffic bridge? Or are you looking for walking bridge? You know, you tell me, well, kids gonna be going here and going there. Kids gonna go wherever they can. Where they going now? I got kids that play in the league that live in Wesleyville. And they walk all the way over so they can get what they want to get. When they closed Division Street, I fought against that and I voted against it. But the kids get to school. Yes, they have to go to the parade or French to get to Piper Burley. I didn't like that. But it happened and we survived. But if there's a meeting, I'll be there. I'll vote for the meeting. And we'll see what comes from the meeting. What can be produced that will change the entire situation. But don't tell us we don't care. There will be some seats opening up in 2 years. Run for office. And then you'll be on this side. And you'll see that many of the things that you ask us to do by law, we cannot do. Those are the things you don't know. Those are the things we learned. We had to learn. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Witherspoon. Two things you never follow, a kid and a legend. That's for sure. But
which one's he?
Your words of wisdom are well taken, let me tell you. And I agree with you, Mel.
That's funny.
You know, I made a few notes here, and that's what we do up here, because I know we've been accused of not paying attention to you. So when we're taking notes, we're doing it so we can remember what you told us. The parking issue. I was amazed during the election how many people gathered that as their, how do you say, their mantra, they're going to make it happen. Well, I want to tell you, after today, I hope you see that we have been working on it for well over 2 years, actually more like 4 years. So it's not like this council hasn't addressed that problem, but so many people grabbed it during the campaign season, you know, time we did it, time we do it. Well, you know what? It has been. It's not an easy process. And you'll find out as this process rolls out all the thought process that went into it. So to the media, I caution them not to be so eager to not research a story all the way to the end and find out just what is being done under the scenes. So much of it is being done now, things that we're doing now that haven't made the press, that people will find out about and then run on and, you know, try to force the issue. I want to thank I met Mr. Carley recently. He's back to work. Please give him council's good wishes. It's glad to see him back. Good to see he's healthy again. On my Mr. Mulvihill, this is directed to you indirectly. I wrote a councilman into the meeting this morning, and the two of us noticed the same problem coming up again and again and again. So I'm looking to you to relay the message to the administration and also where you can help in your department. But the issue on Parade Street with all the illegal parking, the police department has tried to make a difference there. But we have numerous businesses that are parking cars all over the right of way. Now, I don't care how it's done, and I don't care who does it. But we've had citizens come here that demand the same level of concern for Parade Street that we give other parts of the city. Either we have an ordinance that says you can't park on the right of way or we don't. But, you know, they ticket them, they come back. Let's try to solve the problem. Part of the thing that Buki talked about was eliminating blight. Blight is not just bad buildings. It's visual blight. And if you're going to have cars parking all over the right of way, and I see barricades being constructed where people can't walk down the right of way, I don't remember council voting on those easements for concrete blocks. I don't remember council allowing people to park there. So it's with great distress that I bring this to you. But I hope you'll do something, okay? So you've been notified publicly. This is why I do this. Also, 7th Street. Do you think there's a way that we can solve the 7th Street issue? Those of us that take that street never know when your insurance is going to close it or open it. Have a sign put up at Parade Street, very simply. Street closed ahead. We rode in this morning, this councilman and I. He brought up the same issue that one never knows when they can go down 7th Street. It's not always advertised in the paper or on the media. It changes from day to day, from hour to hour. We come in today, just getting around Perry Square was a real mess. So let's get better signage, let's get better coordination. Put a sign up at Parade Street, because that's a main access point for 7th Street, just warning people that it's closed ahead today. Okay, it makes a big difference. They do it in other towns, but I guess, you know, we don't. So that's my end of ranting with you today. One of the things that came up during this hearing about the bridge, it was brought to my attention that council should not do anything for the last 3 to 6 months of their term. I don't know if any of you have heard that. They said it's not fair that this council subjects another council to anything, either appointments or any legislation that we do. So to the two new council members who I think are out there, think of the impact of that rule if for the last 6 months of your term you're irrelevant. This is just like what we dealt with on the federal level with the Supreme Court justice rule. No, that's not how government works. We can't stop business for 3 to 6 months and have nothing move just because we have a new council or a new mayor coming in. They have to deal with that just like I had to deal with it. I'll be done quick, Rose. So, I mean, that bothers me. And the budget impasse, for those that want to delay the bridge, I too will attend a meeting if that's what the rural council is. But consider this. If you read the paper and you listened to the media recently, you've seen what happened with the Warner Theater. Funding was withheld because they're in a budget impasse. The longer we delay things, we give Harrisburg and Washington, who are paying 95% of that bill, a way to either get out of it and leave us with the problem and take the money and run. They're looking for money in Harrisburg and D.C. So when you blame this council for a lot of things, we have to make the right decision at the right time. And until somebody comes up with something better, that's what we're dealing with. And finally, and this will be it, I'd like to congratulate the newest member of our graduation from college, Mrs. Sonia Arrington, who I believe you'll be... I believe you're graduating, when is it?
Well, I don't walk till May, but today is officially my last day. I'm doing my finals and I'll be done. It's been 4 long, hard years I've been going just for my associates because of everything else I do. And at the age of 50, this is a wonderful feeling. So I'm truly blessed, and thank you.
So now you know all those irrelevant things that we learned in college? That yeah. Good. That was great, Sonia, and thank you for all your hard work. Mrs. Controller? Mr. Mulvihill?
After that.
And with that, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Kids and legends, right?
Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan.
Yeah, they're going to
Jones,
switch.
Mr. Mursky, Mr.
As soon as everybody leaves, they're going to.